Do you know how to test it?
To introduce our speaker, we have our own Rick Endres.
Yeah, thank you, President Tom. Good afternoon, Rotarians. You know, in the 17 years I've been doing the programs here at Rotary, it's hard to come up with new material, so you kind of got to grow your own. And so I punted this month and brought my dear Kendall here. You know, tomorrow we remember Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1941, 75 years ago. 31 months later, on June 6, 1944, our troops began the liberation of Europe. And in May, my family and I spent a week in Normandy and stayed in a fisherman's cottage in the scenic village of Port-au-Bassin. My daughter Kendall, a bit of a student of history, wanted to share with you what she learned there about a little-known backstory, the incredible deceptions that made D-Day a success. She guarantees that when you walk back to your car today, that you will have learned something new, or the club will refund the full price of this meal, including tip. Also, with your indulgence, we will set a new club record today. According to our Council of Alexandria Rotarians and Historians, if Kendall survives this 30-minute ordeal, she will be the youngest featured speaker in our club's 88-year history. No pressure, dear. Some of you may remember her past birthday, Rotary birthday or news presentations, when she would climb up on the president's chair behind this podium when she was 6 years old. In fact, I noticed that video of her first birthday greeting is currently posted on the front page of our Rotary website, along with Bill Gates' video. I can see that Kendall is nervous. And I hope that you can think back to a time when you might have felt being 15 years old and thrust in front of a big audience. As her adoring father, I have 2 words for you. Be kind. Alexandria Rotarians, give it up for Cub historian Miss Kendall Endres.
Thanks, Dad. Good afternoon, Rotarians.
Good afternoon, Kendall.
Last spring, I had the wonderful opportunity to take a family trip to France, specifically the coast of Normandy. Prior to the trip, in true homeschool style, my mom made me research World War II and the Allied invasion that occurred on June 6th of 1944. When most Americans think of D-Day, we tend to focus on the soldiers who stormed Omaha Beach under fire. Their bravery is immortalized in movies such as The Longest Day and Saving Private Ryan. Today, over 9,000 of those men rest on a hilltop overlooking the beach. No one can underestimate the sacrifice these men made in what became known as Operation Overlord. I was intrigued, though, to learn about the backstory to the success of D-Day. An incredible amount of deception and misinformation, which turned out to be an integral part of the success of that day. D-Day's success was due to the brave men, yes, but perhaps more so to the management of another, lesser-known operation. Operation Bodyguard. Winston Churchill stated that in wartime, the truth is so precious she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. I am going to share with you just a few of those lies which were a part of Operation Bodyguard. First, an intricate spy network of double agents. Then, an elaborate ruse to fool Adolf Hitler. Finally, I will share with you what I think is one of the greatest feats of engineering ever accomplished, all in secret. When Hitler came to power, there were many men and women in Germany who did not support him, and certainly didn't want to be conscripted into the military. These were the intellectuals who had been educated abroad. Many of them approached the German government and offered their English-speaking skills and experience abroad to leave the motherland and serve as spies. Once in England, they promptly knocked on the door at number 10 Downing Street and offered their services as double agents to the Allied forces. This is Mr. Tom Robertson. He was head of British military intelligence, called MI5. Throughout the war, he was responsible for these double agents, vetting them, evaluating their alliance, and directing their activities. In early 1943, he had a startling revelation. He realized that virtually every single German spy in England was on the MI5 payroll. Now, instead of using these spies just to glean information about Hitler's plans, troop movements, and locations, he could begin the process of dissemination of information to Hitler through these channels. And not just drips and drabs of data, but a huge, war-changing set of lies. Thus began Operation Double Cross. Operation Double Cross involved false trails, fake radio signals, and non-existent armies. The goal for the D-Day deception was for the Germans to think that the Allied forces had amassed much greater numbers of soldiers, ships, planes, and armor than they actually had. Why? It seems counterintuitive in wartime to let the enemy think that you're stronger than you are. However, the goal for this misinformation was to make the Germans think that the D-Day, the invasion of Normandy, was not the real deal, but rather a diversionary tactic to a bigger invasion to come. Double agents sent home information regarding the growing forces. Due to the sheer number of double agents, the Germans could triangulate this information and draw their own conclusions. However, these conclusions were actually the ones drawn up by MI5. One spy, Juan Garcia Pujol, codenamed Garbo, became the integral part of the D-Day deception. Robertson and his team at MI5 groomed Pujol to have great credibility with the Germans by having him pass on information about real events, sometimes in time for the Germans to respond, most often not. The Garbo network was a fake network of fake spies who would pass on information to the Germans, which could then be compared to Pujol's personal messages. In the ultimate test of double-cross, it was decided that on the morning of June 6, 1944, Pujol would contact his German network to announce the Allied invasion. After all, it would be a big red flag to the Germans if a spy of his caliber was not aware of what was happening. So, a mere 6 hours before landing, Pujol called in the invasion. Amazingly, the message did not go through the network in time, so Pujol was able to berate his German contacts indignantly for their failure to heed his warning. Meanwhile, while the Armada was crossing the Channel, a separate, huge number of ships, troops, tanks and planes were supposedly sitting across the channel, waiting to cross, and led by the General George C. Patton. They were meant to verify German High Command's belief that the inevitable invasion was going to happen farther north, at Calais, or even Norway. This was the other part of Bodyguard, known as Operation Fortitude. Operation Fortitude aimed to fool the Germans into thinking that the D-Day invasion of that the inevitable invasion was going to happen at Calais. If you look at a map, it's reasonable to see how the Calais is a preferred place to invade. It's the shortest distance across the channel, and it's closer to a deep water port at Antwerp, Belgium. The story was believable because Calais was, from the Germans' perspective, the only logical place for an invasion. Normandy was not. At its shortest distance, Normandy is more than 3 times the distance to that of Calais in England. The Norman coastline is made of a long, shallow tide that precludes a true invasion. Adolf Hitler had a great admiration of General Patton and expected him to have a leading role in the real invasion. Hitler stated that the first 24 hours of the invasion would determine the outcome of the war. He could not imagine that General Patton would not be there. So having Patton in charge of a non-existent army group ready for a non-existent invasion on Calais gave the lies of Operation Fortitude validity. General Patton became head of the 1st U.S. Army Group, a real command known to the Germans. No one was allowed onto the compound, but people walking the perimeter saw hundreds of tents and supplies. Hidden speakers inside the camp blasted the sounds of a fully functioning army. Mess hall, platoon drilling, machines and tanks moving. All the sounds of an army camp preparing to attack. The piece de resistance of Operation Fortitude was inflatable army tanks and artillery and airplanes, along with fake wooden ships that were photographed by German surveillance planes. All these forces were supposedly poised to invade the continent farther north, at Calais or Norway. Maintaining this deception required more effort as the day drew closer. For every reconnaissance mission flown over Normandy, 2 were flown north of the Somme River, near Calais and Dunkirk. The Allies bombed targets in this area twice as heavily as the actual area they intended to invade. So, was this worth it? The weather forecast for June 6 was bleak. But Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, knew they had to go now. From their perspective, the German High Command could not imagine a channel crossing and ordered war games to be performed. Erwin Rommel, Hitler's general in charge of the defense of the Atlantic Wall, went back to Herrlingen, Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday. Oh, sorry, that's a placeholder slide of Kim Kardashian until I can find one of Frau Lucia Rommel. In fact, many German leadership stationed at Normandy traveled that week to Paris for vacation. General Rommel's wife's birthday trip had actually 2 purposes. As you may know, by this point in the war, Hitler was extremely paranoid. He had placed control of some elite troops and the Panzer tank units under the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, or OKW, which answered only to Hitler. Rommel wanted to be able to control the tanks, and during this trip tried to convince Hitler of this. He was unsuccessful. Due to the success of Operation Fortitude, Hitler was convinced that the invasion would take place at Calais. He later relented to the possibility of some beachhead landings at Normandy, but kept most of his resources in the north. Even when the invasion was in full swing, none of Hitler's top commanders wanted to be the one to say it was the real deal. Thanks to Operation Bodyguard, no one was really sure if it was. When, at last, it was decided that this was the genuine invasion, the German officers at Normandy made the phone call. They called General Jodl at the Führer's office. Jodl was the head of the OKW. He, however, was not convinced, refused to release the Panzer tank divisions, and, most importantly, refused to wake Hitler. Thus, the head of the Third Reich slept through most of the longest day. On June 9th, 3 days into the invasion, Hitler finally relented and agreed to send the panzers. Quickly, our friend Garbo sent a long message informing the Germans that Normandy was not the real deal. He said, quote, "I am of the opinion, in view of the strong troop concentrations in southeastern and eastern England, which are not taking part in the present operations, that these operations are a diversionary maneuver designed to draw off enemy reserves in order then to make a decisive attack in another place." Well, the message was typed up, the word diversionary underlined, and sent to the Führer, who immediately changed his mind about rerouting the Panzer tanks. So, we can see how the truth of the D-Day invasion was well protected by a bodyguard of lies. Double Cross and Fortitude were successful in fooling everyone up to chain of command about the D-Day invasion's authenticity. Many of German High Command's best and brightest commanders felt comfortable enough to be out of town. Hitler himself was sleeping. Most telling, over 600,000 German troops stayed stationed north of Calais and in Norway until the fall of Berlin. Can you see how I was so intrigued by this? And to think that I've only touched on all of the amazing stories related to Operation Bodyguard. Now, let me tell you about something even cooler. The greatest feat of engineering ever accomplished, in my opinion, is Operation Mulberry. Winston Churchill knew that no invasion on the continent could be successful without the ability to resupply the troops. The brave men storming the beach had only 48 hours of food and ammunition. To have a successful invasion, you need to reinforce them with tanks, ammo, food, medicine, and other supplies. Hitler knew this too. It's why he wasn't concerned about a Normandy invasion. There was no deep water port. Churchill demanded a solution to this problem. His telegram of 1942 shows his typical direct style. Don't argue the matter. The difficulties will argue for themselves. The Allied forces needed to build a harbor on the shores of Normandy. Even today, many people don't know that when the English Channel was being crossed by the largest armada ever assembled in history, it was also being crossed by the pieces of an artificial harbor that were to be assembled like a puzzle at the town of Armitage. That big cement egg crate looking thing is a caisson. It's 200 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 60 feet tall, and still there today. Tugboats pulled them across the channel and then sunk them in alignment to form a massive seawall protecting the new harbor. The new breakwater was over 2 miles long. A new pier was designed that could rise and fall with the tide by means of cables and pulleys in 100-foot stanchions. You see, usually a ship would rise and fall with the tide, but the pier stayed stationary. But this is the world's second highest tide we're talking about. So with this design, ship and pier could rise and fall together, allowing ships to continue unloading around the clock. The last part of the harbor was made of sectional bridge pieces that could be linked together to form a flexible road that floated on the water between the pier and land. Each section had to be anchored individually to secure it against the aggressive tide waters. It was flexible enough to work in waves, but strong enough to support a tank. Realize that all of this infrastructure was designed, planned, manufactured, and executed in secret. Over 45,000 people were involved in manufacturing these pieces, 20,000 on the caissons alone. Thousands of tons of concrete and steel and raw materials, all being built in less than 1 year. And no one was really sure if it would work. Even on the morning of the invasion, men in charge of getting the materials safely across the channel did not know what they were hauling. Men following their orders to assemble pieces eventually reached the surprising conclusion that we were building a harbor. Port Winston, as it came to be known, was designed to last 90 days. But Allied forces had to rely on it for over 6 months until the harbor at Antwerp was finally liberated. Today, if you visit Normandy, you can just go to the small town of Arromanches and see the huge caissons still standing guard in the water. In fact, speaking of going to France, Dad says that when you have a captive audience, you take advantage of it. So I was going to share a little less than 150 family photos of our trip. President Tom, I'm going to need an additional 10 minutes.
All the time you need.
Thanks. Here we are overlooking Omaha Beach at the American Cemetery. You've met my sister Meredith, but that's my Nana who came for the trip. It was humbling to stand there, looking over the beach over the bluff at the beach, and seeing what our American soldiers had to climb under fire. Here's Dad overlooking Omaha Beach. He's enjoying a French delicacy, Le Tootsie Pop. You can see how wide the beaches are, up to the bluff. Our troops were exposed to machine gun fire the whole time. This is Longchamp and what's left of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. You can see the large artillery batteries on the ridge in between us. This is a close-up of an artillery battery, one of over 15,000 emplacements along the Atlantic Wall. When the French capitulated to the Germans, they agreed to build and pay for this entire 1,600-mile-long fortress. In today's dollars, that would be over $300 billion. If you go to Normandy, you have to eat their seafood. They bring it in fresh from the channel. This is a fruit de mer platter that Nana and Dad ordered. Look at that huge crab. Finally, here I am with my sister enjoying Omaha Beach. You know, I was surprised at first when I saw people playing on Omaha Beach. You know, having only heard about Bloody Omaha, it seemed odd at first to see people picnicking and kids playing and flying kites. In fact, some people do want to shut it down and make it a memorial. Then I realized that yes, our soldiers stormed this beach. Yes, they died on this beach. But they did it so that future generations, like my sister and me, could play on this beach.
Kendall, fantastic talk. It's wonderful. I've been to Normandy, and I share with you all the emotions and feelings that you get from being over there. And I think your story about the deception and the mulberries is outstanding. We have some time for questions. Go ahead.
There was another harbor that was built. Okay, so there was 2 harbors in total that were. The other was Omaha, built by the Americans. And what's interesting is that the Americans, this is all designed mostly by the British. So the Americans were really quick and thought, you know what, we're going to get this done so that we can get stuff rolling on. And they did. They did it really fast, like in record time, like it's never been seen or done seen before or done since. And I mean, but they did it by compromising the value. So it was done really quickly, and they were like rolling stuff onto the beach before. For quite a while before the British were done, but they anchored like every 6 bridge pieces instead of every one. It should have been, and so then the English Channel, both towns were completely riveted by the worst storm to hit the English Channel in like a century, and the American port was basically completely destroyed. But the British, who were not quite finished but were getting there, were then able, we could then use the pieces from our destroyed one to rebuild that one, and then so it was very little time to take that we needed to rebuild, because we had these pieces from the other harbor that we could then just kind of snap on really quickly and roll stuff off that beach now. I just had to have some.
Well, Kendall, thank you again. Have you thought about what you wanted to study in college?
No.
No, okay.
I'm 15.
You don't sound like a math major. Well, in remembrance of your visit to us today, we have our Rotary Club Jefferson Cup, and please accept this as a thank you.
Thank you.
And please continue to visit and speak with us. You and your sister are wonderful, and you've got great parents too.
Yes.
That's true.
So thank you. So thank you very much.
Trying with all of my might, with only some words that we said, but I can't get you out of my head. Don't know how this went down, I'm not sure if I can stick around. I'm just trying to work it all out. I never thought this moment you would catch my eye. I didn't think you'd be my type. Is this right? Maybe, but you got to me. I never heard the whisper of your inviting voice. Still I didn't have a choice. But you got to me. I wonder if you feel the same way. Do you check out the photos on my page? No reason to want you so much, but with you I can't.